Well, now we're live, and this is Everything Eccentric number 5. I'm Jared Mello, and this is another episode, as I said, of Everything Eccentric. And today, my guest is Becs Sokol.
Hi.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Now, Becs Sokol here, she is an author, and she is also a mental health advocate. She came out with a book probably about a year ago or so now, right?
Yep, back in
And
September.
cool. And I thought that she'd make a good guest, especially from the female perspective of dealing with things like mental health. She dealt with some abuse in her past, and I think it's really a powerful message for anyone who struggled with those kinds of things before. And if you're new to the show here and you're from Beck's audience, please do subscribe, like, comment, share with anyone that you may think will find this useful, and just anyone that could be struggling with mental health or struggling with mindset issues, because those are all the things we're going to talk about here today. So without further ado, how are you again, Beck?
Good, how about you?
Rocking and rolling. We got a little draft in this room today,
Yeah.
which is fine, but
A little
hey,
chilly.
I'm glad you came out.
Thanks.
So you wrote a book, and what was the name of your book?
Life is hard.
Life Hits Hard. And I was curious, there's always usually something that brings people to becoming down, like the self-improvement path.
Yeah.
What was it for you?
Started probably about 5 years ago or so, and I worked for a guy who owns a gym, and his mindset was just all positive and all about success and bettering yourself. So he really got me into learning and reading a lot more about success and psychology and just the mindset. So that's how I really got into it.
Okay. And what made you think, you know what, I'm going to write a book telling my story?
A lot of the books that I was reading were people's stories, so I was like, why can't I do the same thing? And I was spending a lot of time with my niece at the time. She was probably 2. And I was like, you know what? I want to teach her some things. I want to make sure that she doesn't struggle the way that I have. And I figured a lot of other children and just young adults could help with the information as well.
Okay. So, one of the things I'm always curious about is, what are the big takeaways that you live with today? Your big, was anxiety and depression both?
Yes.
Is that what you struggle with mostly?
Yes.
So, what were your solutions? Because I feel like there's a bunch of different kinds of solutions for people, whether it's psychiatric medications or supplements or therapy or counseling, diet, sleep, exercise, sometimes religion or spirituality type stuff. But what was it for you?
So I don't take any medication. I usually just go to the gym. I surround myself with positive people and people that understand me. I think having the support where people actually understand you is the best medicine of all.
I absolutely agree with that. I think that's one of the principles that 12-step fellowships use, right? They'll have, it's basically a form of cognitive behavioral therapy, right? Because you work on 12 steps and you develop a network of people that have similar goals, similar mindsets, and there absolutely is something about that is extremely powerful and positive for people. And just being able to share things honestly with people, I think that's something that people struggle with. How did you overcome that barrier in yourself to just learn to open up? Because I know from reading your book, you're mentioning how this is something a lot of people can probably relate to. You didn't know how to talk to your family as much about your mental health stuff, and they kind of maybe judged.
Yep.
And how did you get over that initial hump to find people to talk to? Was it at the gym?
No, to be honest, I kept everything inside for a long time, and I guess that's how the book came about. I felt more comfortable just writing. And before I even published the book, I wrote a note to my parents because they didn't understand anything. That was the easiest way for me to really express myself. I mean, I read it to them out loud, but I wrote a letter for them to better understand it. So.
What did they say to that?
Well, my mom was crying. My dad was, just kind of shaking his head and just, with agreement or trying to understand. But I think now my mom understands me better. I don't think my dad does, but he's a whole other story. But it was definitely relieving to have them really hear what my true thoughts were.
I see. Now, did your parents have a dynamic? Because I've recently just discovered in myself, for example, that I feel like my dad was slightly more covert narcissistic and my mom was probably more codependent. Were there any kind of dynamics like that in your family growing up?
The same.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, me and my dad don't have a great relationship. My mom's fantastic. But I feel like we all have our issues with our parents and how we come about and how we overcome those issues as we get older.
Right. I mean, I think you mentioned it in the book too, but we can't choose our families,
No.
right? But we can choose our friends. We can choose the people that become part of our networks.
Absolutely.
And I think it's very difficult for people because I think they have these expectations of they should have these kinds of relationships with their parents or their siblings or cousins. But sometimes it just doesn't work like that. And the people you're closest with, maybe not they're not family. And I think it's completely okay. And I think especially for people struggling with mental health stuff,
Yeah.
I think it's important for them to hear this. Like, hey, just because you don't have that best friend relationship with your mother or father that you see the other person does have, it's like, hey, don't worry about it. Like,
You can find it elsewhere, so
Yes.
it doesn't matter. I mean, it's better if it's your family, obviously, but it can definitely be found somewhere
Right.
else.
because here's the thing that I've learned is that if people refuse to respect your boundaries and to like treat you the way you want to be treated, like you got to be careful of those kinds of people
It
because
becomes toxic.
yes.
That's
And it's
not
contagious,
Right.
right? Because if you allow those kinds of people to treat you poorly, then you're going to start allowing other people
Yeah.
to treat you poorly too. And it just kind of
Exactly.
snowballs. And so for me, I just kind of I had to just accept that my family
Yeah.
was going to be a certain way.
Yeah,
And I can't expect them
right.
to act differently. And it's disappointing because it comes off as very judgmental and
Yeah.
they're very controlling. And it's just like, I wish it wasn't that way,
Yeah,
but it just is.
Sounds right though. Sounds about right.
And it's like, I think there was I guess we'll call it a breaking point for me when I decided, like, you know what? I've been telling them my boundaries because, like, for me, what happened was I messed up with drugs a lot and stuff. And so they had, some ground to stand on and say, you were messing up for a long time. And I felt bad about that. So I kind of was subservient to them for a while, submissive. And then I finally decided that, you know what, I've been submissive long enough, I've given them the benefit of the doubt long enough because I've messed up, that now it's like, you listen to me, treat me like an adult now.
Right.
And it was a transition that was very difficult for them to do.
Yeah, I think it's hard for a lot of parents to do that.
Yeah.
But I still feel like my parents treat me like a child, at least my dad.
I think it is, because I don't have kids, you don't have kids,
No.
right? And I guess it must be difficult to see, you give birth to a child, you raise them from birth, you see
Yeah.
them 5, 10, 15, 20 years old, and it must be difficult to kind of like just take the step back and see
Yeah.
them as an
Yeah.
adult, an
Yeah.
autonomous person. But like I was listening to this one narcissistic abuse channel today, and he was saying that's exactly what narcissistic parents struggle with, having you become an autonomous version of yourself.
Right, like try
you.
to live your life for
Yes.
you and do your own thing, but they still want to control it.
Well, because that's what the narcissists do.
Right.
They have a blueprint of what they want people to be like, especially
Right.
their kids. And it's weird because they might not act like that with other people's kids.
Absolutely right.
And they'll
Yep.
really encourage them and do all the things you wish they would do for you,
Right.
but they don't, which is weird in
Exactly.
itself.
Very weird.
And it's like if you break their mold and you don't do what they want you to do, they'll judge it and
Right.
criticize
Yep.
it. And
That's been my life.
and so, I guess you've dealt with it by
I try to avoid it,
okay.
and I try to accept it, because that's the only way it's the only healthy way to really accept it. It's the only thing you can do for yourself,
Mhm.
because they're still your parents and they're still family, so you can't really get away from them unless you really
Right.
just choose to and stay away. But I'm very close with my family, like my siblings and their kids and stuff, so
Right.
it's very hard to get away.
I see. Well, I think in these situations, boundaries,
Mhm.
solid boundaries are your best friend. And just remembering the difference between, I've been a kick on this lately, but the difference between controlling behavior and healthy boundaries,
Mhm.
right? Where controlling behaviors, a lot of what narcissistic type people do, or toxic people, they're trying to fix, manage, and control others to control how they feel on the inside.
Yep.
And they have that illusion that if they can only change other people's behavior,
Mhm.
and they would only listen to what they say, they'd feel better.
Right.
As opposed to just having healthy boundaries where it's like, hey, this is my boundary.
Right.
You can either choose to respect it or not. If you choose not to respect it, there'll be consequences, but
Right.
I'm not going to tie my feelings on the inside
Right.
to what you do. And ironically, when you give the person the freedom to act with their choice, like, hey, I want to do this, more likely they'll respect the boundaries,
Right.
more likely, because nobody wants to be controlled,
No,
right?
absolutely not.
I hate being controlled.
Definitely not now as an adult.
Certainly.
No.
Certainly. Nobody does. Nobody does. And I think I just think it's so fascinating how people who have had similar upbringings, they grow up to have similar issues a lot of times. And there's like these molds that, like they came from a certain type of family, and then they start to have certain types of problems growing up, more like with codependency, anxiety, depression.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's coincidences in regards to that kind of thing.
Definitely not.
So here's another question for you. What made you decide to not do like psychiatric medicines or like supplements at all? Like you didn't think you needed it?
Well, I've tried stuff before in the past for like a few weeks to a month, or a little bit at a time. But when I was on them, I felt like a zombie,
Okay.
and I wanted to stay away from it because I just don't like medication, and I'd rather do it naturally or figure out a way to really handle it myself, which maybe isn't always the best way to go, but it's for me at least, I don't need the medication.
Okay. So I think psychiatric medicines, I don't take any myself, and I don't judge people who do, but I know what you're talking about, because they used to have me on like antipsychotics years ago, and they do make you kind of like a zombie. I think they kind of change a part of you that shouldn't be changed.
Yeah, absolutely. It takes away you from being you.
Right.
And I wasn't okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, I take a lot of supplements, as my viewers know, but that's the thing, though, for me. I don't think it's changed who I am.
Right.
Like, it just kind of, it's not strong enough
Right, you can
to
still
really
function as a person on a daily basis.
Because, I mean, for me, I definitely notice a difference, though, between when I do have my supplement routine versus when I don't. And I notice it most when it comes down to, like, being assertive and trying to enforce boundaries. Because, I don't know about you, but it's really difficult to be confident and to be assertive if your mental health is out of whack.
Yep.
Like, because you have nothing to kind of fall back on as strength. But, like I remember a supplement called tyrosine, for example. For whatever reason, that made me really, it helped my assertiveness level for some reason. I noticed like a distinct difference from before I started taking it to after. So I do notice for me, I think there's some neurotransmitter type stuff going on in there where certain things are involved with like boundaries and confidence, of course. And so that's why I enjoy that kind of stuff. But back into the future here now, like what else do you do in your day-to-day now, like as part of your mental health routine or just like part of your ambitions? Like what do you want to do moving forward?
So I go to the gym almost every day, like 5-6 times a week. I eat healthy, that's a big thing. Food has a big part in what you feel on the inside and how you feel on the inside, and it really affects your brain. So trying to eat healthy is very beneficial for people with mental illness. As for the future, I want to do coaching and writing another book, or a couple more books really. Building my brand.
So let's circle back real quick to something. You mentioned eating well. What does that look like for you?
Healthy food.
What does that mean for you?
Oatmeal, chicken, rice, salads, salmon.
Some more natural stuff, you'd say.
Yeah.
Now, have you ever had the experience that, like for me, if I try to go keto or paleo, I feel like my depression gets worse when I do that.
You can't, I don't know much about those diets because I've never done it. But I feel like if you're like depleting yourself of certain foods, it's not going to be good for you.
Okay, that makes sense. Because there's something about sugar too. I know sugar it improves my mood, despite I know how bad people say it is.
Yeah.
It's like, it's like cocaine in the brain kind of thing.
Yeah, basically.
But for me, it has helped. That's for sure.
Yeah, I love sugar.
I think the 80-20 rule is essential in the diet.
Moderation, yeah. You gotta eat everything in moderation.
So it's like, the Navy SEALs will say 80% of the time you eat well, 20% of the time you cheat like hell.
Yeah.
And that's what I subscribe to.
I agree. I'm all for it. I love desserts. I love sugar.
Me too.
Yeah.
And so how about like your exercise routine stuff? Do you focus more on strength training or cardio?
I do both. So I do 3 days a week of cardio after I lift, and then the other days I'm lifting. And I just started boxing too.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I've wanted to do Muay Thai for a while now.
Yeah, I love boxing. It's fun.
Yeah, it was empowering, I bet, probably.
Yeah.
Especially as a woman. Like I know from reading your book that you had some experience with being physically abused multiple times in the same night. I think it'd be beneficial for your audience to hear like how you got through that, how you dealt with that, because that was probably a pretty painful experience.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had some anxiety attacks for a little while after that. It was just a very, very scary night. I mean, I was out with my siblings, my family, but I was alone at the time. And then it was just like a train of events. It just like kept going. These people just kept assaulting me. And I like blacked out. Yeah, I blacked out like 2 times. And it was horrible. And I mean, I guess like the time just passed and I kind of got over it. I mean, there's nothing I could really do about it. So I kind of had to just accept it and learn from it, really.
I see.
Yeah.
Would you say you had PTSD from it at all, or?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I kind of forgot about it and tried to not remember it. But I moved on from it. It was a few years ago. So if someone brings it up, I remember it, but I try not to, focus on that.
I see. So what did you learn from that whole experience?
Don't go out and fill it by yourself.
Okay.
No, seriously, like learn how to defend yourself. Always, be around someone that you know, and never really be by yourself.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, especially a guy, sometimes I don't put myself in the shoes of a woman and think about all the different kinds of troubles they may have, but it is different.
It's
right?
a scary situation when you're on South Street, by yourself at night, and all these people are drinking and doing whatever. You just never know.
Yeah. Because that was like a series of unfortunate events. I was reading that in your book there. It's like multiple people were choking you out of nowhere, it seemed. Like that's...
It was just wrong place, wrong time type of thing. And
it's unbelievable.
Yeah, it was horrible.
Well, we're glad you made it through that, okay? And now you have your story to share.
Yeah.
One of the things you mentioned in your book about that. So that was cool. Now, I mentioned diet. I mentioned your exercise routine. How about like spirituality-wise? Do you do anything with that now?
Not really. I mean, I love it, and I do want to, start doing more of it. I just haven't done that yet.
Well, I think like some people can have like their gym routine can be their spirituality, or if they have some sort of hobby such as singing or playing a musical instrument, or just like laughing with friends. I think those can all qualify as a spiritual experience.
Absolutely.
Same with like yoga, meditation, church, of course, or 12-step fellowships, whatever people do. It's like I'm not too judgmental in that realm. Where it's like whatever works for you is what I think is cool.
Yeah.
And I know when we first came in here, you mentioned some of the other hobbies you were doing, but like what are those other hobbies you do to kind of take up your time?
I read a lot. I like to bake. I make candles sometimes.
I read that.
Yeah. And then writing, of course. I just love to write. So I'm working on another book. And then I hang out with my friends and watch funny TV shows.
That's good too.
Yeah.
But so how did you get into the candle making? How did that come about?
I was bored. and I loved candles. Like I had a big collection myself, and I was just like, you know what? If I can buy these, how hard can it be to really make them?
Right.
So I just kind of taught myself how to do it.
That's one way to go about doing things. I think people who don't have hobbies, they're the people I see who struggle the most with things like codependency or other kinds of addictions. And what they'll usually do is they'll take on the problems of someone else as their own. Yeah. And a lot of it's because they just don't have something they call it to self-soothe. That's something that narcissists don't have either. Right? They don't have the ability to self-soothe themselves. And one of the things they don't have is hobbies. So like one of the red flags I look for in people is if they don't have hobbies, like that's a big red flag, especially in romantic relationships, because chances are another person's their hobby or multiple people are their hobbies, and that's not good.
Definitely not healthy. You definitely need your own outlet to, escape for a little while.
Absolutely. It's something I've struggled with before too, but like I use YouTube as a hobby. I have these shows that I do as a hobby. But I do want to get more into like playing guitar and playing the piano too, because I do sing, but I found it's pretty difficult to find people that want to play what I want to play, because everyone wants to play their own thing.
Right.
So it becomes kind of difficult with that. But you mentioned that you want to do coach. I want to talk about books too, but you mentioned you want to do coaching. Like what would be like your ideal client of the kind of woman or man you want to work with?
Someone struggling who just wants to be able to live life on a positive note. I know everybody struggles in their own way, but I feel like if you just have someone to understand you and a safe place for you to like talk and be comfortable, I think that's what I'm here for.
I see. I know it certainly helps me when I talk to people about what's going on. And see, I think just doing it for the first time initially is what becomes difficult. But once you get through that hump, it becomes easier, right? And like then you need to. You realize like the therapeutic value of what it does for people. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of people want to be heard and they want to be understood. And it's very hard for people to understand each other.
Sure.
So I'm very open and very understanding, which is why I do what I do. But people need to be understood and heard. It's the only way they feel like they're being healed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I know Stephen Covey says that seek first to understand as opposed to being understood. And I think that's always a good rule of thumb that a lot of people who don't have wisdom, they don't have that.
Right.
They're judging. And I think that's what we see a lot of on social media these days. We see a lot of the not seek first to understand, but how about seek first to throw a rock at that person's house because I disagree with what they say.
Right.
And that's what you see, though.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. People are sometimes the worst, you know?
They can be.
It's very hard to find genuine, real people nowadays. So when you do, keep them.
Sure. I mean, I think social media is certainly changing things for people where, like, I'm 34 years old. I remember distinctly before social media came around, and I think things were a heck of a lot different before that. And I think there's something that I can point a flag at that time and say, yes, things have definitely been different since social media came out. Like there's something about the interactions with people, the way society is that, I'm not saying it's all negative, but I'm saying that there's something that overwhelmingly is negative. Like it's just not a good thing. I feel like it's just like, it's hard for me to really articulate what it is, but there's something that's kind of off.
I feel like we've lost connection with people. I mean, everyone's looking for that physical connection and that mental connection with somebody, but through social media, it's very hard to really do that.
Well, it's like we can be more closely connected to someone in California or in Europe, but then the person right across from you at the dinner table or at the bus stop just to say something. It's like you're further away from that kind of person. And that's what's crazy to me.
Yes, agreed. Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people who are younger in particular, they struggle just to have conversations with people. They don't know how to speak to people anymore. It's like, it makes them too uncomfortable, I think, a lot of times to even just talk to someone because they're so used to just...
Yeah, because they don't know how to really interact with people because they're always hiding behind a phone or a tablet or whatever.
Well, what do you think would be a good way to kind of like get people out of that?
You really have to just choose to. Yeah. You know, put yourself in situations where you don't need your phone, or put yourself in situations where you're able to meet other people and you want to meet other people. That's the only way you can really do it, is choosing to go find people that you relate to or want to be friends with. Yeah,
so I don't know. I feel like the world's heading in a crazy direction when it comes to this social media stuff. I don't see it ending completely well, to be frank. I don't know how it will end completely well. I think I was talking to someone yesterday about this too, where they mentioned that something about like parents are going to have to do a good job with structuring boundaries with their kids' phones, because I think they're absolutely right. Like people lose like a sort of innocence now when they have the internet, because if you're a dude and you're 10, 11, 12 years old, you can find anything on the internet. So back when I was 12 years old, people had to scour the earth for like a Playboy to see. But now it's like you can go to any kind of pornography, any kind of violence, gambling, any sin you want to see. It's right there on your phone. And so there's a certain like innocence that gets lost, I guess, in that. So you see things that you probably shouldn't see.
Agreed.
And so like that's why I think it's going to be really important for the parents to kind of have guidelines and boundaries. Or else these kids are going to be like 13, 15 years old, like probably like porn addicts, you would think. I don't know. Or the female equivalent would be, I don't know what. But.
Yeah, I feel like kids are going to have a lot of issues.
Well, I think it's already coming about. Like you see it. And it's so new that we don't see what's really happening completely yet. It's like when they have a new medicine. Like until you see like 10, 20 years down the line of many people that have taken that medicine, you don't know what it's going to do.
We just don't know.
So this social media thing has been around for what, 10 years?
Yeah.
2008, 2009?
More, a little longer.
So we're going to start really seeing how that's affecting the kids' development, I'd say like 2020, 25, 2030. And we'll see what happens. I mean, who knows what it's going to look like, but...
I don't know. I mean, I remember when Facebook first came out in like 2005, and it was only for like college kids. And now like dogs have Facebook accounts. So it's crazy. Like
You're
everybody
right.
has Facebook accounts now.
I know Joe Rogan's dog has an Instagram account.
Yeah.
Marshall Rogan.
Yeah, see, that's crazy. Like, why do pets have social media?
I'll tell you what, Marshall Rogan has more followers than me.
Right, probably same. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I know one of the next guests I'm going to have on here is a practicing witch. And she practices witchcraft. And I actually do believe, and we might connect over this part of it, but like every morning, I do affirmations.
Mm-hmm.
I do write down things 15 times, like certain like personality characteristics or things I want to cultivate in my life. I write it down 15 times, and I think like just something about writing it, reading it, seeing it absolutely does work.
Yep.
And I think, unfortunately, I think that witchcraft might operate under like a similar principle,
Probably.
where they're throwing stuff out into the universe and doing these commands. But I don't know. I'm curious what it's going to be
I
like.
think that'll be very interesting.
But I think it works in the same manner as like hypnotism does. Like, I guess that's a good one to ask you too. It's like, what was the biggest like shift in your mindset? Because I know for me, it was when I first went to How to Talk to Yourself seminar, and I'd gone to a network marketing company, and it was like something about like electric nonsense or whatever, and I didn't do anything with the network marketing company. But when we went to this seminar, we had this How to Talk to Yourself seminar, because they're big into the positive self-talk there in the network marketing world, that like that was a spark for me. It's like, wow, how you talk to yourself matters.
It does.
And I began to see, another cool thing I've noticed about it is like how your parents speak to you growing up becomes your internal voice as you're older.
Yep.
And I'm like, yep, that's absolutely how it's been for me. And depending on your parents, of course, it's like, man, you have a lot of like bad talk in your head, like a lot of judgmental thoughts, a lot of controlling thoughts, and it's like, it's not good. So did you have any like aha moments where you like maybe you read a book or I don't know, talk to someone where it's like you just got that jolt of like, wow, I need to get my mindset under control here?
I think it was, after I broke up with my ex, it was really me suffering so much to the point where I was like on my floor crying, like, what am I going to do with my life right now? But I realized something had to change. And so I really worked on myself and changed my mindset to really be positive and surround myself with positive people.
Right.
And get rid of all those toxic people that were in my life at the time or, were in my life, It's really just choosing to be positive.
Okay.
Changing your mindset to be happy. Sometimes you really just have to choose it.
Yeah,
Especially people with mental illness, it's like it could be very back and forth. So you really have to be aware and cautious of what you're thinking, but you definitely have to choose happiness.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with that part too. I know that when people are struggling with anxiety, depression, that's when they're the least likely to want to do the things that are good for themselves. And that's why I think it's so important to build a trust in yourself so that when you say you're going to do something, you do it.
Exactly.
So it's like, that's why I think it's useful to make your bed in the morning because it starts the day off with a completed task, right? And then you say, okay, no matter what, I'm going to go to the gym, regardless of how I feel.
Yeah.
And I'll say this about the gym. I don't think I've ever felt worse after going to the gym and working out.
No.
So it's like just little things like that, though, that can really make a huge difference. And then there's also like little sayings that I've encountered, like, this too shall pass, which it always has eventually. Yeah. Or, I don't know, just little things like that are the things I really like I fall back on that have really helped me mindset-wise. But I wanted to go into like your relationship stuff too. Have you noticed like patterns in your relationships of attracting the same kinds of people?
Yep, absolutely. I was seeing somebody who definitely turned out to be like a narcissist, like very crazy. So the same characteristics as my dad.
How common.
Right, I was like, this is extremely toxic and awkward.
Well, they say narcissists, they usually attract codependents, or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe codependents attract narcissists. But and I think something about it is that the narcissist detects when people don't have solid boundaries. They detects when they can find someone who's a people pleaser or going to be a pushover. So I think they just they're like a moth to the light with it, and they just go right to it.
Yes.
But have you had any particular examples of just like knowing, I have to like really work on my boundaries, really work on just kind of being happy and single, because that's one of the themes of your book too.
Yeah.
Is like just learning how to be okay on your own.
Right, you have to. I mean, you can't really rely on somebody else to make you happy. You have to do that within yourself first. Otherwise, nothing else is gonna work.
Absolutely.
What was your question?
It was about like how did you have anything to like help with your boundaries, like anything that like has really helped you to know to put yourself first, to not be such a people pleaser.
You know, I'm always just real. I'm always real with people, so I tell them what I want, what I need, and if you don't like it, you know, so be it.
Right.
You're gone. Like, I can't sit here and try to force something that's not meant to be. So I spent years before in the past doing that, you know, trying to change people or trying to just make things work that weren't meant to. And once you realize that not everyone's going to like you, not everyone is supposed to be in your life forever, it kind of becomes peaceful.
So I think you have something in you that I think a lot of people are missing, and it's the ability to be happy and on your own. Like that's a distinguishing point that a lot of people just don't seem to get to. And I think what happens to them is when you're not okay on your own, you're much more likely to form an unhealthy attachment to people, places, and things.
Yeah.
But the ability to be your own and be happy, like that's priceless. And that's also another thing I want to get into, the name of your brand. Be your own hero. Right? That's so you have a clothing brand that is called Be Your Own Hero. How did that come about?
Well, it's called Be Your Own.
Okay.
But the main slogan is called Be Your Own Hero that I use. I got it tatted on my arm too. It's really just a reminder that you really have to support yourself and put your needs first all the time. Otherwise, you're going to be a disaster. And that's who I was in the past. I was a disaster in the past.
Right.
So you really have to work on yourself and make the decision, you know, to be happy on your own, do the things that you love to do, and not worry about what other people want or need at the time.
Yeah, I think, ironically, that's what people respect the most, too. They respect the most when someone's going to put themselves first and, like, take care of themselves, be independent. I call it now radically respecting themselves because we teach other people how to treat us.
Right.
And if we're not going to treat ourselves okay, and we're going to put other people's needs first, other people will treat us as we treat ourselves.
Absolutely.
And it's just the way it is. So, but I like thinking of it that way because it puts the responsibility on us. If people are treating us poorly, it's our responsibility to do something different.
Right.
Because it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because if we're constantly being mistreated, we are cooperating with the treatment they say. And it's like, hey, we can put an end to it. Like we can't stop someone from treating us poorly the first time, but we can most certainly put a boundary up after, or limit our contact, or cut off that person.
Right, absolutely. I've cut off a lot of people.
And it's so necessary though, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know people who are codependents in particular, they really struggle with setting boundaries because it wasn't okay for them to have boundaries growing up. Like they were supposed to like always bend their will to make other people happy.
Yeah, it's always doing what other people wanted or needed, and now it's like, sorry, I'm doing what I want, what I need. So.
And like in the beginning, when a codependent person first tries to start having boundaries, like they get that sense of guilt, like I can't believe I have to do this. But once they break through that, it's like they can kind of experience the positive effects of not having as many toxic people around them, of not having to put up with like abusive people, not having to put up with emotional abuse, because that's what people do.
Yeah.
And I had particular experiences with family, cousins, where like I thought I had to put up with it because my parents would always say, "You should just get along. Like why are you gonna have a boundary? You should just get along."
Right. No, see, I don't agree with that. I feel like even if they're your family, they can still be toxic.
Absolutely.
So.
The most toxic in some cases,
Exactly.
I've noticed.
Yeah. So you stay away from the people that you can stay away from.
I mean, it's made life 1,000 times more peaceful for me.
Absolutely.
When
100%.
And like you go through this like phase, it seems, where when you're first starting to establish boundaries, if you haven't already, like there'll be a kind of, I guess, like an event where a lot of people just kind of go away because you have to cut off a lot of people because they're refusing to treat you differently. But then once you get through that, you might have a little bit of a lull of kind of being on your own, maybe not have a big group of friends or a community. But then I feel like it's our responsibility to kind of find another community, find more friends.
You have to, and they become better friends, and you could feel a lot more of a connection with these people that you just met compared to people you've been friends with for years.
Absolutely.
So I think that's awesome because I really don't have that many friends. I keep my circle very, very small, and I'm very cautious of how I spend my time and who I spend it with. So.
Well, they say it's better to have 4 quarters than 100 pennies, and I
Yes.
agree with that.
Yes.
And I try to pay attention to the feelings I get from people, like the energies
Yeah.
after I speak to them. It's like, did it feel like a fight? Did it feel like a battle back and forth to communicate? Or did it feel empowering? Or did it feel like they were really encouraging and supportive to you? And just kind of reflecting on my interactions, that's really helped me too.
That's what I do too. You have to.
And it goes a far way. And it's unfortunate sometimes with people you feel like you've had the battle with, because oftentimes it is like, may have been close friends or may have been your family. And you realize that there can be a lot of haters out there, especially on this type of entrepreneurial path where other people may say things like, oh, why can't you just go work for the Amazon warehouse or go work for someone else? And it's like, I want to do this. And they just don't support it.
They don't understand.
Right.
That's the problem. A lot of people just don't understand. And it's hard. It's hard being your true self when people can't understand you.
I think that's why it's so important to just have the people that are going to encourage your positive goals and support you. And not just say never to call you out on your BS at all, but just to have someone in your corner. Because I used to make the mistake a lot of when I was feeling down about myself in my entrepreneurial endeavors, I would try to reach out to like maybe friends who wouldn't be supportive or family that wouldn't be supportive. And that was my fault. I shouldn't be reaching out to them when I know they're not really going to be supportive.
Right, you
like,
know what they're going to say already. It's like, just get
and it would really be doubly bad because I'd be already down.
And I'd like just bring you down even more.
Yes, and so it's like I had to realize, Jared, if you're going to feel like wishy-washy on your ambitions right now, like go to people who are going to support you if you reach out to them and say, this is what you're going to do. And that's what I've had to learn to do differently.
Yeah, exactly. Done the same thing.
Yeah. So that's also a pretty good thing there too. What else here? Another question I'd asked, actually about the relationship stuff too. So you've been, I guess, single now for a while, or?
A long time. Yeah.
That's impressive.
5 years or so.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Starting to get lonely though.
Yeah, I mean that's just part of being human. I mean, that's the other thing. Like it's hard to. I guess we'd all be tempted to like, kind of beat ourselves up sometimes about some things, but humans are meant to be social creatures.
Yeah.
That's just a normal part.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind being single. Like, it's a great thing. You can just focus on yourself and not have to worry about anything really.
Right.
So I really don't mind it.
So I know you were thinking about doing some sort of network marketing stuff too. Have you decided to get more involved in that, or?
No, I mean I'm still involved, but I'm just focusing on like my brand and my books that I want to write first, and then when I feel like I've completed everything else that I want to complete, then I think I'll get back into it.
Because I like some of the things that a lot of network marketing companies are doing. Like I get their philosophies of positive thinking and becoming financially free.
Right.
I'm 100% on board with those things, but there is one thing, and we mentioned earlier, that I don't agree with network marketing companies with. It's where they say you really got to be careful with any sort of negative thought that comes into your head or etc. And the reason why I say that is because, especially people who have struggled with anxiety, depression, etc., I think it's way more important to keep it real with some people than have to try to pretend that you're not feeling a certain way. And I've seen it end in suicide, literally, for some people in network marketing companies. So it's like, just don't ever forget that your feelings are valid, and people who are really going to be friends of you, they're not going to judge you if you just share you're having anxiety, depression. You don't have to play that I can't have a negative thought game. I think it's important for people to know that.
Everyone has negative thoughts. It's when you dwell on it for a long period of time where you get in trouble.
Exactly. So I think sometimes though you gotta just like, you gotta release them. You can't like stuff it in. Because I think that's something I've done before when I try to act like a saint, or try to have no vices, no nothing, no negative thoughts. Eventually what happens to me is they boil over and I act out completely.
Right. You go crazy.
As opposed to just kind of letting them out slowly. Like the 80-20 rule there too, I think is really important.
Absolutely.
Which is why I say, like, yeah, someone wants to go drink once in a while, I say go for it, I don't care. Like, if it becomes a habit, like all the time, that's a problem perhaps, but like 80-20. 80-20 you'd be good, 20% you can go have a blast, let your hair down. I think that's important too.
Agreed.
And I think there's other network marketing people out there that maybe are struggling with that very same thing. Maybe they're having anxiety, maybe they have depression, and they're afraid to reach out to their little community because of that. I think it's important for them to push through and say, listen, it's okay to have these kinds of thoughts and to keep it real
Right.
and still be successful in your network marketing company.
Yeah, I think it's very uncommon for people to really talk about that stuff, and it's becoming more common to actually have a conversation
Right.
about mental health and depression and anxiety. But I feel like a lot of people are still afraid to speak about it, and that's what we need to change.
I think it's getting there. I know, like for addiction right now, there's really been a huge push, like to eliminate the stigma of addiction with the opioid crisis that's been around, and I think they're getting some leeway. And I don't think mental health is as far along as addiction is yet. I've noticed because here's the thing a lot of people don't want to talk about. Like there's a lot of different ways that mental health portrays itself.
Yes.
That can be pretty vile in some cases.
Yeah, well,
right?
that's society as well, just portraying it that way. I mean, with depression and anxiety, at least for me, like, it doesn't define me.
Right.
And a lot of people, I feel like, they think that it defines them, but you have to choose to be who you are and embrace it. I've learned to embrace it, and that's, yeah, you have to. Otherwise, you're going to be sitting there for years and years and years struggling.
Absolutely. I agree with that too. So, a couple more things I want to ask you here about what you're going to continue to do. What are the plans with your brand? Like, where would you like to see the Be Your Own brand go in the next, 5 years or so?
Yikes, 5 years. Well, I mean, I'm doing a lot of different aspects of the brand. I mean, clothing is just one physical product of it. The book is another aspect of it. And then another book that I want to write is going to be coming out soon.
Cool.
So I just want to keep improving and keep doing things that are going to help people understand mental illness. So I want to create a course for people to really understand it from a different perspective, whether you have it yourself or you know somebody that does have it, so you can understand each other. It's all about understanding.
I agree with
that. And that's
that.
what I'm really trying to strive for and really to push with my brand, is to understand each other.
What would you say, what would be one thing you tell people that are maybe struggling to understand right now? Maybe they have a family member or a spouse that's struggling with anxiety and depression. What would you want to say to those kinds of people?
Really just say, you have to be patient. You really just have to be open-minded and be patient with everyone, because you really don't know what somebody's going through unless you put yourself in that situation.
Right.
And that's the only way you can understand, is really putting yourself in their shoes and just being open-minded. It's the only way you're gonna get each other.
Sure. I mean, me, someone who's had mood disorders, I can still get impatient with people myself, and I've been through it.
Me too.
It's I get it. Once, I guess I can struggle with, I feel like I've gotten a lot of it down, where I've gotten to a good spot.
Right.
And I can still go look back at people that were maybe struggling, maybe even in the same ways I was, and be annoyed at them. Maybe because I'm seeing myself in them years ago, but the person that I see in myself years ago, I gotta remember that person needed some love and acceptance too. Just because it wasn't the best place to stay permanently does not mean that they didn't deserve patience, love, tolerance, acceptance, that kind of thing. So it's funny how things change.
Absolutely.
I mean, you can look at when we're out of that spot. I see it happen with addiction people too now, where they get clean and they look back at the people in active addiction, and it's they forget where they came from.
Right.
And be pretty judgmental about it. But
yeah, you just gotta realize that everything is temporary. The pain that you feel right now is definitely temporary. It can seem like it's not gonna end ever, but if you just keep going one day at a time, that's one of my sayings I use all the time. That's how you're gonna overcome it. Just going, keep on going.
So here's another question I'd like to ask people, especially in my coaching stuff. It's if you had to describe what your life would look like ideally, if things were going exactly the way you wanted it to look like, what would that look like for you?
Just being surrounded by great people, being happy, being positive, and having a great family, having support, having friends that support, and doing well in my business. That would be ideal.
Okay.
That's what my future holds.
I always like asking that question to people because I know sometimes they haven't given themselves the permission to even let loose their actual thoughts. They've always been kind of trapped by maybe other people's expectations of them.
Yeah,
and
I've been there for sure.
Yeah, so give yourself the permission to say, hey, what would this look like? And even if it's not completely realistic, I think just learning about what people's interests are or can be like signposts, because I think that is one of the good things about this social media era is there's so many different things you can do and incorporate into your life now that involve your interests.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
like maybe you like music, you can play music and upload it to YouTube,
Yeah,
right?
find
Or
groups.
Spotify or whatever.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the advantages we have right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's another thing. I also ask this question a lot to people, but if there's any person, like dead or alive, that you'd like to have a conversation with for an hour or so, who would that person be?
I can answer that one for you. So do you watch the TV show Impractical Jokers?
Yes.
Brian Quinn.
Now, which one is he? Because I don't know all their names, but he's on every time I get a haircut. They have him on in the barbershop.
It's on all the time.
Is he the bald one?
No, he's the one that cut his hair. So he used to have like the long hair, and he wears a hat like all the time.
Okay.
He wears a scarf all the time. Yeah. No, he, for some reason, he just really interests me, and I'm pretty sure he's dealt with depression
Most likely.
before too. Like he's been clear about that. So I just feel like he would be interesting to to talk to about everything.
Yeah, I believe it. I think a lot of people that do comedy in particular, there's something about a lot of them have this like kind of dual personality type thing, or bipolar maybe even, where on one side they're manic and happy, and on the other side, like now they're dark, depressed, like look at Robin Williams.
Exactly.
Or maybe even other people like Anthony Bourdain, for example. He had a lot of people's dream jobs, and yet, like, I was talking to someone on the subreddit the other day, and they were talking about how, money and dream jobs aren't everything. Look at Anthony Bourdain. And I say, yeah, I agree with that part. But I also think, like, he also probably had a drinking problem, too, that I don't think he addressed very well. And it's like, this goes to show you that mental health doesn't go away just because you have success.
Right.
And I think that's, to me, the important lesson there.
Absolutely. Totally agree with that.
So what did you, I don't know, you probably got impacted a little bit by Anthony Bourdain's thing. What did you think about that when you heard it?
I don't follow anything, to be honest with you. I stay away from everything. I'm in my own little world. I don't watch the news, and I don't read a lot of stuff on social media.
It's probably for the best.
Yeah, because I know what it can do to the head and to your brain, and it's just like I can't do negative. So
that makes sense to me, because usually all you would see on like CNN, Fox, and which other one, MSNBC, there's all sorts of negativity, all sorts.
Can't stand it.
So you would have a conversation with the dude from Practical Jokers. Huh?
Yeah.
How about, I guess we'll wrap up with two more things I'd like to ask you. So if you could say, here's a good one. It's, what is an event that happened to you that you wouldn't want to have repeated, but turned out to be a great thing for you?
I'd say, going through my relationships. My ex, that was a very tough relationship. He was dealing with addiction himself, so I was on the other end of that. So I dealt with the lies, everything else that comes along with addiction. So that was very toxic for me, especially at that time in my life, because I wasn't where I'm at today. Like I wasn't mentally here. Like I wasn't happy on my own, I guess we should say. So I relied on him for my happiness, and that was not good. So once that ended, it was like, wow, like what do I do? Like the rug gets pulled out from underneath. It can be very painful. And that's what really forced me to, learn how to be on my own, learn how to be happy on my own, and really change my mindset. Absolutely. So I guess we'll wrap up this last thing here. If you could say anything to like your 18-year-old self, what would you go back and say to that person? 18 years old, it's a long time ago. Not too long, wait. 32. I'd say to do what you want to do and not listen to what other people want you to do. Right. So like find what sparks an interest in you and sparks that passion in you, and really just do that and not worry about society and what they say or what your family is saying. Just do what you enjoy. I know for me, it took me a long time to really kind of figure out what I wanted to do. I think I figured it out when I was like 28. Yeah. I was doing like writing on step working guide type stuff from NA, and just from like learning about myself and like being forced to hold up a mirror, I began to see like patterns and the kinds of things I really enjoyed. And I thought at the time I wanted to be like a counselor or a therapist. Yeah. I've since amended it to
more so the coaching stuff
Right.
and this,
Yeah.
like the YouTube channel, writing a book, because I wanted to focus more on like the future stuff,
Absolutely.
right? And I'm not going to say all counselors don't do that, but I've heard a lot of counselors don't. Like they don't focus enough on the present and moving forward, as opposed to just kind of like uncovering what's happened to people. And I don't say it's completely unnecessary to look at the past, but I also think all we can really focus on and change in particular is what we're doing now.
Absolutely.
So it's like, what we're going to do differently to like heal,
Yeah.
what are we going to do differently to make sure the same relationship patterns don't happen again. And I think those are the things to really focus on. And that's why I switched into that. But I also think it's important to keep an open mind about like how it could look.
Right.
Like I think it's important to have goals and then be open to maybe if something comes along while we're on our journey
Right,
to
absolutely.
maybe go explore it and just see what happens, as opposed to just being dead set. But in some cases that might not be the case. In some cases you should just say no to things
Well,
that
yeah.
are not going to go towards your goal.
Right.
But anyway, is there anything else you want to mention to the audience?
I don't think so. I think we covered a lot.
Well, where could they find you if they wanted to reach out to you? And we'll include this in the description too. But like,
So I'm on social media on Facebook, Instagram, Becs Sokol on both, and then my website is beyourownhero.com.
and is that where they can find your book too? Be Your Own Hero.
My book is on Amazon.
Books on Amazon.
Yeah.
And what's the title of the book again?
Life Hits Hard. You
Life
can just
is Hard.
search my name in Amazon and it'll come right up.
Awesome. Well, it's definitely been a pleasure having you on. Thanks very much for it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was awesome.
Absolutely. And thanks everyone for watching. Again, like, comment, share. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode here. Comment if you liked it, didn't like it, etc. Whatever. Any kind of feedback is always going to be good. I always appreciate any feedback we get. So with that, over and out.